in the last like 24 hours, we've seen a lot of stories around CPS underreporting and basically dismissing weak cases. Tell me what you think about that and your thoughts around this idea of weak cases, if that is a thing.
It's so worrying. I mean, it's one of those things that I think that anyone that works in the kind of around sexual violence thought was happening. Anyone that's ever supported someone through a case or heard of someone going through a case, or anyone that's gone through a case themselves, thought that that's maybe what they were doing, because cases just weren't getting, that's where the gap was, that women were reporting that cases just weren't getting actually into court. And then now to find out that actually it's part of the training that the CPS is doing to prosecutors, telling them not to take weak cases because of their statistics. And that's so upsetting, because I guess the focus, people are focused on the statistics of the CPS to try and get them to improve, and the way that they've responded to that, instead of improving, is to work out a way to try and make their statistics look better without actually changing the system. That's
absolutely ridiculous. So in that case, what will then happen to the CPS? What does that mean? Because in my mind, if we can't trust people who should be protecting us, what does that mean for women and our safety? It's just ridiculous. And I think for me, this is why we have the importance of, for me, like social media, and you have the hashtags like the Me Too movement or Why I Didn't Report. And for me, a lot of the times I do like send people to go to this hashtag and actually read why women are actually not reporting. But then you have the women who do report, and then you hear stories like this. So it's only going to deter women to report even less, because it's like, well, maybe my case isn't strong enough, and they're going to see it as weak, so I'm just actually not going to do it.
I've also, the thing that always worries me about this as well is what message does it send out to perpetrators and potential perpetrators, because you've got men sitting there going, cool, if I can, target women that are going to look as though they're weak, so like we're saying, homeless women or women with drug and alcohol issues or anything, like if we can specifically target women that are going to not be credible witnesses, then even if she does get up the guts and pushes herself in light of all of this stuff and still goes and reports, oh sweet, it's not going to go to court, the CPS got my back, it's screwed.
And that, when I was working with women exiting prostitution, a lot of the women were assaulted and like victims of sexual assault, and many of the times, even when sent a case of what do you want to do, was like, well, they're not going to believe me anyway. They're not going to believe me, and that just breaks my heart, because they didn't feel like anybody would care just because of the line of work that they were in. And I don't know, I think that's why it's so important that we do have things like the Me Too movement to shed light. But also at the same time, I think when we look at what's going on over there in America, and the leader of the free world is co-signing and wanting to appoint someone in his office who has been accused of sexually assaulting 2 women, it's almost just like, what kind of example is that setting? And it is very problematic. So sometimes when people want to change things in terms of policy, it makes me a little bit, is there a point? What does this look like? So for example, with the whole making misogyny a hate crime and conversations around that, and the upskirting bill, like shout out Gina for the upskirting bill, but I'm not too sure about seeing misogyny as a hate crime, just because for several different things. Like, what do you think about misogyny being
I think I've got similar kind of misgivings than you. I don't know if misgivings is the right word, but like the 2 main things that I think that are important is one of them is that it's important to actually, we've got the violence against women and girls strategy, we've got violence against women and girls as a frame. It's really important that we keep that, and what we're seeing is it's getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and we're moving closer and closer toward a degendered, violence against people are violent against other people, and you're losing the reason, that exists because of gender inequality. And so with misogyny as a hate crime, we're moving, it's a different frame, different policy frame, so we're moving something that actually should be under violence against women and girls into hate crime, instead of strengthening the violence against women and girls framing. So I'm a little bit like, I think that that's maybe indicative of how weak the violence against women and girls strategy is becoming, and how we need to actually refocus our energies on getting kind of cross-party sign up to that, and have everyone understand what violence against women is. And then the other thing is around motivations. Like, I'm not entirely sure if it is, so hate crime, so I guess there's a lot of misinformation. So people think that hate crime, misogyny as a hate crime means that all of a sudden wolf whistling is going to become criminal, but it's not. Hate crime is a way of categorizing things, not making any new crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So if it is a crime already, it's still going to be a crime.
Yeah.
And it allows you to report what they call incidents,
Mm-hmm.
which are things that aren't a crime, but allows them to put them, like, categorise that this is happening or whatever.
Yeah.
But it has to be something that's perceived by the victim as being motivated by prejudice based on their gender or, race, religion, the other categories. And I don't know if some forms of sexual harassment are going to be that.
Yeah.
I don't think, being told to cheer up, like, is that motivated by somebody hating me because I'm a woman?
Yeah.
No, it's motivated by someone thinking that they can just interrupt me because I'm a woman, but it's not hate.
Yeah.
So I don't even know that if they use it for that categorising thing, I think that'll still not give us actual real statistics about how much this is going on. So if the purpose is to give us better recording practices, I don't think we're going to get it.
Yeah.
What about you? I mean, you've said before at an event, and it was years ago, but it always stuck with me, around the thing about, that you wouldn't report men from that you knew, like from around the traps and stuff, because you know that they're already over-policed.
Yeah.
And I think that's a massive thing that gets missed.
It is, like, for me, I think, of course, you want to kind of, like, it's weird, because doing this work, I always want to encourage women to be able to go and report, but then in my heart and soul, it's very difficult for me, in particular with young black boys, to go and report them, and then knowing that they can maybe get a longer sentence or be punished a bit more harshly, and what that's going to look like, and their face is going to be plastered all over the news, and that's my worry when it comes to sometimes changing some of these things or looking at things like hate crime. Unfortunately, young black males will be the example of it, and I think it's just something, as a black woman, it's something that we continuously always struggle with. For me, why I feel like it's important to have women's spaces and specialised services, because they understand that. Do you know what I mean? They understand that kind of issue of having to kind of balance gender and race, where unfortunately sometimes like mainstream services don't. So all this going like ungendered for me just doesn't work, because we do need the women's services. Like, it's so important. Like, even when we was at the event the other day speaking, I know we had the Women's Nottingham Muslim Centre. Yeah. And they were speaking about Muslim women being attacked, which for me should fall under kind of like hate crime in terms of, like, let's say, like religious. I don't know what the category would be, but like faith, because of their faith.
Religion, faith.
But I just feel like, are the police actually even dealing with that as a hate crime in terms of religion and faith? I feel like it's more the Vogue or women rights that are actually championing it more. We're championing it more as opposed to it being a hate crime. So it's like, okay, so you want to make misogyny a hate crime, but you're not even dealing with, which for me is basic hate crime. Do you know what I mean? And you don't actually understand even what misogyny is. So sometimes when I'm hearing some men speak on it, I'm like, you're a liar, you don't know what it means, you're just been given these words to kind of make it make sense, but you don't even actually know what misogyny means, or you don't actually believe it actually really exists. So how are you actually going to really implement this, let alone when we look at the police service? So I'm just like, no, you know me, I'm just like, you lot just want to start something new again.
This is but I think it's so
to catch some buzz.
That's like, what on the ground difference is it going to make in the lives of women and girls? Really not very much. And the difference that it might make is going to be a particular section of women, and that's the particular section that would report, and they are going to be just a particular type of woman. And that's cool, but we also need to work out how are we going to support and prevent this stuff from happening to all
110%. You spoke a little bit about like prevention, and it actually not what is it going to do in terms of prevention. And in your new book, Right Amount of Panic, that everyone should go and buy, you speak about self-defense. Initially, when I heard about self-defense being used, I was like, is this victim blamey-ish? But obviously hearing you like break it down and actually reading that segment of your book, I was like, it makes sense in terms of you speaking of women taking up space and women being able to have the confidence of using their body. Do you just want to explain it a little bit more? Because I know you can explain it better than me.
Probably not. I was the same as you, to be honest. I always, for a really long time, I always thought self-defense is victim blaming, because at the core it's saying something about you should, I was always like, we shouldn't have to do something, they should stop doing it, blah blah. And then I started to think, actually it's not an either or, like it's not like either they do something or we do something, it's both. But I think it was from the research that I did in the book, is that I learned that a lot of women have really actually changed how we feel about our body and how we feel in our body, and that we've been trained over time to take up less space, and so to sit like I'm sitting now, and to sit on the tube a bit like this, and to kind of shrug and to look down and to to be smaller. We've been trained that if we take up a lot of space, we're kind of opening ourselves up for all forms of kind of intrusion and interruption and all of that. And so self-defense for me, feminist self-defense, is about just undoing some of that. So it's not really about giving women skills, it's about undoing the way that we've been taught to be in our body, and we've been taught to be smaller and to be quieter and to not take up the space that actually we're entitled to. And different women have different relationships with that, you know what I mean? It's not that all women have been trained in the same way, but it's when you take it as a whole, you just see there's so many messages telling women, you know, from the diet industry, you're too big, to, you know, men on the tube who will put both their hands on the things for you to go in. There's just constant messages telling us that we should be smaller. And so one thing about, you know, being able to feel as though you can take up some space in your body, and the other thing about using your voice.